Well, good morning, everyone. It's week 5 of our Business Owners Forum, and we've got obviously a couple of panelists that are going to speak to us today. So welcome, everyone. It's great to see everybody again, and getting through some difficult times, but things seem to be settling a little bit for everyone and getting used to the new norm and this way of communicating. But we've really enjoyed bringing this forum to you, and we've been getting some really great feedback from everybody around hosting this forum every week, and so we appreciate that, and we're glad that we're able to provide information and support at this difficult time to our business owners. So thank you for joining us again. We appreciate it, and we're glad that we're able to connect with you on this weekly basis to be able to do what we say we're going to do, which is support the community that we have. So I will just share with you my slides for today. So just by way of introduction again, so for those that have only just joined us recently, so this is a Business Owners Strategy Forum. My name's Matt Murphy. I'm your host. I'm the Managing Director of Prime Academy Business Advisory, and spend most of my life, as you no doubt know, that helping business owners achieve the dream of why they went into business in the first place. And so that's very much aligned with what we're doing here today and supporting everybody. So the reason why we created the forum in the first place was really to connect, to share, support, strategize and implement, especially in this very difficult time of what we're facing at the moment with COVID-19. So it's very heightened at the moment, and we're all navigating through the complexity of everything that's coming at us as business owners. And so that's the purpose of coming together and really sharing information and supporting as much as we can. So the agenda for today is that although there hasn't been any new announcements from the government on the stimulus, we thought we'd spend just a couple of minutes talking about the commonly asked questions that we get as advisors on a daily basis that we thought that, we'd share with you from an information point of view. I'm going to talk a little bit about leadership today in terms of, some of the things that I talk about on a daily basis, especially around the workshops that I provide on leadership, and just highlighting some of the key themes and messages that we should probably be aware of or thinking about a little bit more consciously of going through this process. As an extension from last week, Mark Bowe is going to speak to us about pivoting businesses. So he gave us a bit of a taste of some of the things that he's been doing with our clients and with us in terms of pivoting. And so we're going to talk further about that today. And then once we get through the presentations, as normally, we'll do Q&A. So make sure that send the questions through on the Q&A button if you've got any throughout the presentation, and we'll cover those off towards the end of today's session. So without further ado, we're going to get into it. We are, as I said, first of all, we've got Paul Maneri, who's one of the directors at Prime Academy Business Advisory, who's spoken before, just to give us a bit more of an update as to really some of the things, probably more around the process of how to go about accessing some of the government stimulus packages, and also covering off on an announcement that came out of probably more for Victoria around sort of tenants and rental agreements and those sorts of things. So I'll hand it over to Paul, who can share slides and screen now. So thanks, Paul, for joining us.
No problem. Thanks, Matt, and hi to everyone. Let's see if these come through okay. Are these coming through okay on the slides?
Yep, perfect, mate.
Excellent, great. So yeah, this is more just of an update on the JobKeeper program, which over the past 3 weeks since the Prime Minister announcement, we've been sort of drip-fed information. The legislation was passed. Now we're starting to get to a situation where we've got some dates to work around, which is good, and some of the processes have started to sort of formulate. So I think this is more just an update of what we know to date, and we'll work through that. So just to sort of recap, some of the details around eligibility have been firmed up. So key criteria: on the 1st of March, you carried on a business, you had at least one employee, and your eligible employees can include employees of your business for fortnights that you're looking to claim for, which can include ones that have been stood down and then rehired. One sort of key component that we've been sort of discussing with our clients is the eligibility around turnover. So the 30% turnover was initially announced. The drop in turnover of 30% compared with the prior period was the initial assessment that we were looking at. We've had discussions around clients as to how that maybe isn't the most appropriate way, but what they've confirmed is that 30% for most businesses that we deal with, larger businesses 50%, and ACNC registered charities 15%. They have clarified in the last week that turnover is based on GST turnover. There's been a few sort of areas where the ATO have advised that further information is to follow. So we're waiting to see what that looks like. The concept of GST turnover is one of those, but it's looking to align turnover to information that you record in your activity statements. If we sort of focus on turnover a bit more with what we know, it's based on aggregated turnover. So that includes the turnover of a business and connected businesses or affiliated businesses. So for the larger groups, we do need to consider that if we're looking at meeting a 30% reduction in turnover, then it needs to be across a larger business group where you have connected entities within bigger groups. One important sort of item that's been announced or released recently is that the turnover criteria or that element only needs to be satisfied once. So you don't need to keep retesting it. So they've given it as the next point, the dates in which turnover can be tested. So, GST turnover for March on an actual basis compared with March 2020 compared with March 2019. That one would be easy for most businesses to see if they satisfy that, because we've passed through March. We can analyse our numbers and we can see that might apply. If not for March, you can look at your GST turnover for the month of April being on a projected basis. Being halfway through the month of April, we may be in a position now to project what that might look like. Again, comparing that to April 2019 may allow us to satisfy that requirement. And we can extend that projected period over a quarter. So we can look at April to June for the 2020 period based on projections, compare that to the April to June period from last year and see that we meet that. So if we can pass either of these components, we only need to satisfy that test once. So we don't need to keep retesting every month. So that's been clarified recently, which is good. So we now have some direction around how we need to work through the turnover component. As we touched on, and we have previously, the Commission of Taxation has discretion for alternative tests for businesses where the prior year turnover is not a great comparison of the impact that the coronavirus may have had. A startup business is a good example of that. Businesses that have been scaling up. So things like that, we are still waiting on details as to what those alternative tests will be. But at this stage, we understand that they still may fit into criteria as part of the process. Now we've got some specific dates around how the enrolment process will commence and when. So it will commence, or you can start to enrol from the 20th of April, which is next Monday. The process needs to be done through the business portal or through a registered tax agent through the tax agent portal. Now, access to the business portal has changed. Previously, business owners would have been able to access details around their business from the ATO's perspective via an AusKey. That's been effectively cancelled, that process, and we're now in a world where MyGov ID is the way you can access that detail. So the MyGov ID, it's important to note that is separate from your MyGov login that you would have on a personal basis, potentially, that captures your Centrelink, Medicare and tax affairs. It's separate to that. So it's a separate process where it's all app-based with a two-factor authentication. You basically need to provide some detail around your identification in the first instance, being your passport, birth certificate, something to that effect, to actually get access to particular businesses. And then when you log in, you get a notification on your phone, which allows you to then log into to the business portal. So it's probably a process, if you haven't got that already and you're looking to go through this, is to have that set up to allow you to access the relevant details. Next step is to provide employees with what's called a JobKeeper employment nomination notice. So they provided the format for that. So when we share the slides after this meeting, it'll provide a link to the document. It's a 2-page document that basically is required to be filled out to show you the employee details of eligible employees that fit within the criteria. So employees that are on a full-time, part-time basis, or casual employees, as we've spoken about before, for more than 12 months. Probably worthwhile, if we're looking to start the enrolment process on Monday, it's probably worthwhile maybe starting the employee declaration component prior to, because you'll need to have these in place and submitted as part of the process by the end of April if you're looking to apply for the JobKeeper for the month of April. So just to save some time, now that we've got that document available, it might be something that we can look at now. One of the other requirements is that the businesses need to continue to pay employees at least $1,500 for each eligible employee for the periods that the ATO is looking to catch up the payments on. So the ATO have identified, the government identified that they will be paying for the month of April in arrears, but we need to have ensured that those employees were paid at least $1,500 per fortnight to be eligible for those periods. So there was 2 fortnights within that period. The first one being 30th of March to the 12th of April, and then the 13th of April to the 26th of April. So important that, to tick the box for April, that the employees were paid at least a minimum of $1,500 per fortnight per employee. The employees have been notified and those details provided back to you and signed off so that you can include them as your eligible employees. Then the next process is to submit the form via the business portal or through the tax agent portal. And then if you're looking to submit for those first 2 JobKeeper payments fortnights, being those periods there, then we need to do that by the end of April. So there's, starting on the 20th of April, next Monday, there's 10 days to effectively get the details in order to allow for those April payments to be effective. From there, there's an ongoing declaration process. So from the 4th of May, 2 weeks later, we'll need to submit what's called a JobKeeper declaration report. Details haven't been confirmed, so we're not sure what that looks like, but it's designed to allow you to confirm the eligible employees that remain employed by your business and that you're looking to have eligible for the JobKeeper program. And then it's also designed to provide a mechanism for showing what your updated turnover details are and projected turnover. So we don't need to, just reiterating there, we don't need to retest the reported fall into a turnover, but they will be requesting details on your turnover position over the coming periods. So that's more the maintenance component. So we've got an initial sort of application enrolment step, which does cover the month of April. Then ongoing, it's providing details around employees that remain employed and turnover details through the ongoing period to continue to receive the JobKeeper payments. So that's really where we are. So we've got at the point where, come Monday, we can start working through this process, and that will start to sort of provide us with more sort of items that we can look into, whether it be the alternative turnover tests and things like that. Next slide, just a basic one, as Matt pointed out. On Wednesday, the Victorian government had an announcement around the what they've sort of deemed to be rental relief just across the board. So it's a $500 million package. Legislation is due to be passed on Thursday. So this is more just of an outline of what we expect to get passed, but it does cover residential, commercial tenants and landlords. The first component, the largest component, is land tax relief. So it works in a way that if landlords are providing their tenants with rent relief for those tenants that are impacted by coronavirus, then they can receive a 25% discount on their land tax and also defer land tax till March 2021. On the residential side, there's $80 million going towards providing rent relief payments if Victorians are experiencing hardship due to the coronavirus. More broadly, sort of covering off as part of the measures, evictions will be banned for 6 months for residential tenancies and commercial tenancies that involve small to medium-sized businesses. Rental increases will also be banned for commercial and residential properties for the same period. on the business side of things and on the commercial business premises, they have criteria as to what the eligible businesses will be, and they'll be businesses with annual turnover under 50 mil and that have experienced a 30% reduction in turnover due to coronavirus. So some correlation there with the JobKeeper payment. So as I mentioned, waiting for the legislation to pass, but it's just an across the board sort of relief that the Victorian government has applied in relation to rent.
Thanks, Paul. I know that there's a similar thing in New South Wales and also in Queensland regarding the rental side assistance as well. So we can cover those off, and I think we covered off Queensland one in a previous session. But good information once again. There's questions that we'll get to towards the end of the session around some of the things that Paul has said. So from a clarity perspective, but once again, we're learning things on a weekly basis because, as you can understand, announcements are made, legislation then gets passed after that, and then you need further clarity, and that's what's the process at the moment that they're dealing with. So, appreciate the update on that, Paul. So, thank you. As I said, today's about, and these sessions are about being as rich in content as we possibly can and get through as many things and to support everybody online. So the next topic that we wanted to talk about is leadership. It's a topic that keeps coming up for me. Talking to clients on a daily basis about how they're coping with what we're dealing with as business owners and leaders in our organisations. And it's an area that I've spent a lot of time in, and I run workshops and seminars and conferences around leadership because it's just such a key critical component to the success of an organisation. All the things that we cover in leadership are things that we know, intuitively know, and we understand. So it's not rocket science, the things that we talk about, but a lot of the time it's about bringing it from the back of your mind to the front of your mind and ensuring that you're actually living the principles on a daily basis. So I'm going to talk a little bit about leadership and some of the concepts that I'm seeing at the moment, and then we'll move on to Mark Bowe to talk about some the process of business pivot strategy. So one of the things that we've spoken about in the first session was that it's a key critical requirement of business to have great leadership. It's the thing that holds a different. It's where success is in an organisation, and we know that. For business owners, it's a confronting statement, but the business is a reflection of you. Everything that goes on in your business is fundamentally a reflection of you. As much as we like to say it's not, effectively it is. So we really need to be focused on how well we're leading our businesses under normal circumstances, but more so as we are today. So what is leadership? Well, there's lots of definitions, but I think that the best definition is that leadership's about influence. And right now, people are looking for us to lead and guide them. And so we need to be able to influence people and outcomes and really lead them towards, through the complexity of this. And so it's really important to start to look at your leadership style and ability, especially when we're going through this. So leadership in a crisis. Well, leadership in a crisis is something that we start to see it's even more powerful than under normal circumstances because, we need to ensure that we are actually leading teams and leading our businesses to certainty in the future. So, a bit of a sort of a criteria to think about and check in on yourself about how you're performing at the moment as a leader in your business. And are you doing things like creating your vision, okay, and making sure that you communicate the direction that you're going in for your organisations, because people need certainty right now. And really they're looking towards the leaders of their business to provide them that certainty. So it's ensuring that there's a consistent approach to that too. And also we need to ensure that we're constantly assessing what's going on and gathering information around us to ensure that we're pivoting appropriately, which we'll talk a bit about from a vision perspective. So the qualities of a great leader, there's many of them, but great leadership embodies two qualities they're both highly visionary and highly practical. I've been spending a lot of time talking to people around their why, their purpose, their mission, because that sort of stuff doesn't necessarily change too much in businesses. but we need to be, especially in these times, we need to make sure that we're very focused and we can articulate that. The vision, provides a picture, what we're trying to achieve, and the strategy is about the plan, about how we're going to achieve it. So make sure that you're actually checking in with yourself at the moment to ensure that you're very strong in your why, what, and how. And it's really, really important to live the vision, okay? So effective modelling the vision makes the picture come alive, especially when times are tough, uncertainty is high, and chaos threatens to overwhelm everyone. Followers need a clear picture from their leaders. And I just use an iconic example to highlight this particular point. So I've pulled out some of my content and slides from my leadership workshop and course. And this is something that really resonated with me when I thought about, the 9/11. It was a really uncertain, chaotic time in our lives. And you can imagine living in New York at that particular point in time, how frightened you would be, and the fear and the uncertainty of what was transpiring on a daily basis post that event. And so when I started to think about, what happened and who was behind sort of the lead out from that, obviously the mayor of New York at the time, Rudy Giuliani, he was quite amazing. And I was pretty inspired when I actually read his book around, what he actually did from a leadership perspective. But you can imagine in that crisis, there was a lot of people running in multiple different directions, and he needed to bring everything together. And so he actually had a morning structure. So he had his philosophies and practice is to put everybody on the same page. So all the emergency services people he would have a meeting with every morning to actually put everybody on the same page. He was obviously forced to make quick decisions without a lot of data. So therefore intuition played a bit of a part in regards to that, and which we'll talk about today as well. And then he wanted to ensure that everybody was accountable to whatever they promised to do on that particular day. So it's really important in these uncertain times, is to build structure and consistency around how we're really performing as a leader in our business. Some of the other things that he did was quite amazing, was that there was 26 funerals a day that were occurring post 9/11. He personally attended 6 of them because he believed that was the right thing for him to do, and the rest were attended by representatives from the city, from the government. And you look at that and you say, well, that was a really wonderful way to ensure that he's leading by example in terms of how he went about it in this particular crisis, when people needed to feel that they had somebody that they can rely upon and count on when things were pretty dire. And interestingly enough, when he was interviewed about his leadership, he said that he learnt his leadership skills by watching others that he admired, which sort of leads me on to the point about the most important traits of a leader, really. And we know this stuff, but sometimes we can forget it, especially in times of difficulty, which is around leading by example. In terms of, what are the most important traits of a leader, which was a research that was conducted, was that leading by example was the most important thing that we could do. So, living the value, living the vision, living the direction, leading by example, like Giuliani was doing by attending funerals himself and pulling the teams together, hugely important. So just something to really reflect on and consider is that how well are you leading by example? What are you doing? What are people seeing about your leadership style? And are you getting the best result because of that? So the greatest gift that a leader can give is being a good example. So do you look like a leader, act like a leader, talk like a leader, and walk like a leader? Because 89% of what we know, we learn visually, and we know this as a stat. And so therefore, it's about how you're currently performing at the moment, and people are going to take direction from that because of the fact that they're going to emulate that particular behaviour as well. So these are things that we know. So not rocket science, nothing that you don't already know, but in these times we can lose sight of it, especially when we're feeling a bit vulnerable and uncertain, that we can struggle with a little bit with this sort of type thing. This is a time where sometimes you have to put that aside and really stand up and really provide that strong direction. At the moment, I'm spending a lot of time talking to business owners around, the lack of data that they have. You sometimes can predict the future based on the data of the past. Right now, we don't have all the facts. We don't have all the data. And so therefore, one of the things that we're relying a little bit more on is on our intuition. It's something that basically it's a difficult thing to understand what intuition is because it's not concrete. But fundamentally, a lot of the time we know the answers to things. We know the direction we need to go into. What we're sort of saying to people nowadays is trust that intuition in the face without a lot of data. Now, obviously, what I still encourage people to do is gather as much data as they possibly can and information as they can. So you still need the facts and the conditions, but you put the facts and the conditions and the instinct together, which then allows us to know instinctively what play to call. So that's something that we need to back our judgment on, especially when we don't have all the things that we need to have. So these are just things to think about when you're considering moving forward from that. So leaders are readers of their situation, which is the atmosphere and environment, their trends. They sense it first, which is the gut feel, and then find supporting data. Their resources, which is leverage, how they can actually leverage their businesses. People, which means that they can read they can read the room, they can read people. That's all about emotional intelligence, and themselves, also how well they know themselves, because making sure that the perception is the reality of you and how you're leading. And so there's a formula I'm not going to go through today that we talk about in the leadership training around understanding yourself and others, around communication preferences, personality profiling, and also appreciation preferences that actually help you engage with your teams and lead them effectively. And so we won't necessarily go through that sort of type stuff today, but just because of the interest of time. But one of the other points that I wanted to talk about is prioritization. So right now, there is a lot to do, okay? And we're pulled in multiple directions, and we need to make sure that we're making the right decisions about where we spend our time. And it requires a lot of focus and refocus of our priorities. So what we need to always consider is ask yourself the outcome and why. Why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we spending our time in that particular area? It's really conscious, because we can get busy and we can waste time, but now is not the time to do that. Now is the time to get very focused. And so therefore you need to review and reset your priorities really daily, weekly, quarterly, half yearly and yearly, always. But really right now, it's test and measure. Every single strategy that you come up with, every single thing that you're doing at the moment, you should be testing and measuring on a micro basis, because that's how we gather good data at the end of the day. So that's a really important thing to do. A couple of quick iconic examples of that. Steve Jobs came back from being booted out, and he came and went and then set up Pixar, came back, invited back to Apple. And when he came back, he saw that there was 120 products in development, and he slashed that down to just focusing on 4. So he got very focused around the things that he believed were going to be the products that were going to be in high demand. And that's a really important thing to think about right now. And also when we start to go through with what Mark Bowe is going to talk about in terms of this process, is focusing on the things that are going to make the biggest difference and are going to bring our businesses through this successfully in the future. And so it's, we know a lot of this sort of type of concepts, the 80-20 principle, making sure that we're focusing on what's going to get the biggest results for us. And I was talking to a business owner today around making sure that we're talking to our top 20% of our customers that drive 80% of our revenue, because really that's how we gather data. So if you're not, these are the activities that you should be doing to focus our energy. We've got, refocus. So Jack Welch was another iconic person that ran GE for, from 1981 and until 2001. And he did the same thing. There was 348 businesses or product lines that he came in and pretty much reduced it down to a very few amount of those. So he closed some and divested others, resulting in a $10 billion transaction when the value of the business was only $12 billion. He then invested $18 billion into the ones that remained, which further strengthened them. And then what the result was from that is that the stock traded at $80 per share from $4 per share in 81 to 2001. So the reality is focus and refocus from a leadership point of view is really, really required right now. So all I wanted to do is quickly touch upon some of these things today to ensure that we are, as leaders, leading by example and being focused on the really, really important stuff right now and reflect and measure constantly to get data, but also in uncertain times, you need to rely upon your intuition. So really that was just a quick sort of update and summary around sort of what I believe to be the things that we should be focused on as leaders of our business and leading them through to being successful once this thing, well, during COVID-19, but once we move on from it as well. Which leads me on to our next presenter, which is Mark Bowe. So Mark presented last week on a few of some of the pivots that he's been doing with our clients in business and his clients in business. And so Mark is actually now going to take us through the actual process that he goes through to actually get us from, to pivot those examples. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And Mark, if you wanted to share your screen in terms of that would be good.
Thanks very much, Matt, and good morning to everybody. First of all, let me open up my slides here. Okay, what we covered off last week, I'll just do a bit of a review, was basically going through two companies, one being WBCM Environmental, and effectively what they did was really simple. Within a 48-hour period, they went from having a industrial cleaning product, they're doing industrial cleaning and whatnot. They'd made some chemicals in their own factory to be able to support that business. We worked with them in 48 hours and basically produced a consumable product, which is now being sold through Woolworths, Coles and Bunnings. And that was from woe to go, a very quick pivot. Second to that, we sat down with them and realised a huge opportunity in cleaning waste chutes. So what we did is we did a workshop, designed a robot that can go up a waste chute and clean a waste chute without a person going up, effectively reducing the cost of by a third, and had someone organise, found a customer who decided to buy it. That was a 30-day process from woe to go, and effectively moving forward, they consider this business to be bigger than their current core business, having global applications. Second client we worked with, a company called TGM Group Holdings, right in the middle of it. They had to close down all 15 of their cafes, and earlier we'd worked with them on buying, late last year, a food wholesale that was supplying 500 cafes in Victoria. So you can imagine, decimated from a revenue perspective. But what do? They were getting frustrated because they couldn't find any hand sanitizer. We went to a pharmacy. Within 24 hours, we had gone through a whole TGA process, found a formulation, worked with a branding agency, found scientists and whatnot, and on the right-hand side, launched the Jolly Care range, which is now being sold with has achieved over $300,000 in sales. So that's helped them plug a little bit of a gap, but also use those resources and pivot their skills within the business. So once again, really quick pivots. But I suppose the thing is why could these companies pivot so quick? I think the first thing is we'd worked with these clients in the past and really had them laser focused on what we see as true economic profit. So why is this so important? Well, sometimes as business owners, we do lose sight of what we're actually making in the business. So we sit down with all our companies and work with them on the basis that, okay, if you took the $100,000 that you've either taken in wages or you've invested in your business, you can go and put that in the bank, albeit small rates. If you look at the time you've been in your business, have you actually made any more money than you would have made at no risk? Pretty confronting when you speak to business owners about that. But the really interesting thing is, and some of the research that we've done globally, is that only about 8% of companies ever make a true economic profit. Some of the work that we've done is with a formulaic process, this pivot strategy. On average, around 78% of our clients end up making a true economic profit. And the reason for that is because, as Matt's shown in his leadership presentation earlier, is whilst we're in the middle of a crisis, many organisations, their true problem is what we call a wicked problem. And what is that? A wicked problem is a situation where we've never faced before. There's no strategy. There's nothing on shelf. We can't go to Harvard Business Review and just implement something. So what we actually have to do is create our own, bar the pun, our own ingredients and recipes. And that is effectively how we pivot. So I'll take you through a bit more about that. So yeah, so firstly, these companies have a laser focus on true economic profit. They don't spend money unless it can make them true economic profit. Secondly, they are always focused on their star and question mark businesses. So some of you would have be familiar with the Boston Consulting Group map, but what is this map? It's a really good way, and Matt talked before about what Steve Jobs did and what our friend Jack Welch did. But in small to medium businesses, we can do this every day. So looking at your products and your services and go, well, wait a second, where should I be investing money to grow? And interesting enough, a lot of organisations spend an exorbitant amount of money investing in cash cow businesses that don't necessarily going to grow. So we help organisations move their money towards either looking at merger and acquisitions, actually going out and buying products and services from other companies, or more importantly, looking at their R&D and actually developing new products and services as question marks that can turn into stars. It's a really simple process to do, and it's something that you can do in your own businesses, and really starting to look at where do I sit in the market? But once again, the organisations that we pivot with, we have a laser focus, particularly in this bottom right-hand corner of starting with your R&D. The other thing is an innate ability to know how to innovate. So we spend a hell of a lot of time working with organisations on their innovation plans. Organisations that have a high sense of readiness for change, that is from a cultural perspective, have a greater ability to navigate through these situations. So the two organisations that we showed before, some of the things that they have a continuous innovation portfolio. What do we mean by that? Well, basically, these organisations just aren't focusing on trying to work out their ideas themselves. They're looking outside the business. They're working with customers. Some of the best innovations in the world actually haven't come from internal. A few years ago, we'd all know that the Nivea business went out to all their customers and said, hey, tell us what you do with our Nivea face creams. And about 6 months later, some of those products ended up on shelf. That cost Unilever $0. So there's some of the things that organisations are looking for and ways to generate their ideas. Embedding an innovation culture, buzzwords, but these organisations are consistently looking at ways that they can have purpose, structure, people and ecosystems about building that from a cultural, and that really does come from a leadership perspective. And the leaders are hell-bent on driving this continuous innovation culture. And the last thing is the broad sourcing of ideas. Their ideas aren't just about looking at incremental changes to products. They're not just looking at how they can make new markets with existing products. Some of these organisations that we're working with are even starting to really heavily contemplate, well, wait a second, the Industrial Revolution number 4 started 2015. So we've been working with customers on how does artificial intelligence and automation fit into your business? How can I pivot? How can I be part of that industrial revolution that's coming hard and fast over the last 4 years? And I think what we're seeing today is this is a great opportunity for organisations to start considering, well, how can I be part of this digitalisation of the planet? They have very fast can-do fast strategy plans. So they can make sense of the data around them very, very quickly. They work with their teams to ideate options. What do we mean by that? So most people that are on this Zoom call right now would appreciate you can probably think up 4 ideas really quickly yourself. And most leaders take it upon themselves to think up 4 ideas. But what some of these companies do is we realize to actually get divergent thinking and depth in thinking, they actually give a list of, they ask all their people across all their business the 10 ideas. Now you might say that's crazy, but let's just say you've got 20 people in your business. That's 200 ideas that you didn't have. These companies are doing this religiously in toolbox meetings, work in progress meetings. But when it came to the crunch, they looked at the data around them, they ideated the options, and very quickly they can bench press their plans. What I mean by that, they actually test it. They test before they go live and they execute. So let's have a look at what that would look like. So making sense of the right data. So we talked a bit before about how do you get your strategy plan so that you can achieve a true economic profit up towards that high 70s. Well, these organizations are looking at the following things. Size matters. They align their focus with large revenue bases. So they're actually not just focused on their current business. Where is the business going? Who are the big operators? Who should we be partnering? How do we get there? Secondly, they always look at where the smart money is investing. For example, right now, where are the smart money investing? Where are they going? What trends are they? Where are the big superannuation funds putting their money right now? Where are the commercial real estate people putting their money right now? Where are the VCs, PEs? And not only that, these organizations are looking at how they can co-create with these large incumbents. What I mean by that, it's not just about doing business with them. It's about how you can work out other ways, co-distributing, co-design. We'll talk about that in a bit more. They look at macro trends. So what I mean by that, well, one really interesting bit of numbers that we're working with customers is that millennials now make up 50% of all people in the workforce and have one of the highest disposable incomes. That'll be 75% in 5 years' time. Moving that forward, we have 2.3 million here in Australia, millennials, 75 million in the United States, 400 million in China, 425 million in India, and just to top it off, 170 million in Europe. Now, when you start looking at those numbers, you go, well, which markets can I target? There's some really interesting concepts that they're looking at. The other thing they do is they're not afraid to invest in R&D and M&A activities. They make big bets. So what I mean by that, a lot of organizations will continue to fund our core cash cow businesses. But unfortunately, if those businesses aren't growing, it's not going to do much for you to really return a true economic profit. And that leads on to the concept that most of these organizations have stopped peanut buttering. So what do I mean by that? Just like peanut butter, you spread it on your toast. Same you can do with your investment in growing your business. As tempting it is to invest in a part of your business that's doing really well right now from a cash cow perspective, the organizations that truly get there have the capacity to move money from one area of the business to another to make a big bet. They use ideation tools. Some of you would have heard of the design thinking innovation process, but these are rapid implementation tools to actually get things to market. So the design thinking process here that you see on screen, that can take from anywhere from 1 hour to a day. But you can see very, very quickly, we're not taking the usual 6, 7, 8 months to do focus groups workout. From inspire, ideate, implement very, very quickly. These organizations don't just have one idea. They're punching these ideas through this format more than, on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. One of the other things they do, as I said, is they get out to their people and they ask their people consistently around 10 possible futures. So for example, when we looked at the work that was done with the hand sanitizer, what we did is we went to the people and we said, hey, what can we do? As I said, the first 4 ideas are latent thinking. Everybody's got 4 ideas. But in order to dig deep and get the real magic from ideation, you've got to go down to 5 to 10. It's actually well known in cognitive science that that's when we unleash true brain power. And these organisations have embedded this in their business and use this concept of 10 possible futures on a regular basis. What also does it do? It takes away what we call the ad hominem. It takes away the attack on the person. Why haven't you got any ideas? What it does is it brings it back to the issue at hand of what we're trying to solve. And once again, a great form of leadership in driving, particularly in this time, of driving those core values again across your business. From there, it's all about populating a one-page strategic plan. For example, Matt and I worked yesterday with someone on exactly the same process and really understanding how to move forward. A very clear set of core values, the purpose, your targets, your goals, right down to what you're going to do tomorrow. From there, a lot of people turn around and say, well, wait a second, I just don't have the money to do this. Obviously, we have the capacity to access grants and whatnot. They go, well, what can I do right now? So we help them put together a co-creation map. What a co-creation map does is allows us to look at different ways to leverage our business forward without actually having to spend any money. So what I mean by that, co-promotion, having a look at not only your customers, but people across the ecosystem you operate in that can help you get places and vice versa without spending money. The co-creation tool is an incredible map. We've worked really closely with multiple clients on such an idea. It doesn't mean that you're giving things away for free. It helps with an ecosystem of learning. And one of the things of the co-creation map is it helps organizations to learn how they learn.
Mark, I know that you love talking about all this sort of stuff, and I love talking about it as well. But I just, because in the interest of time, maybe if you want to just sort of leave us with the last couple of quick thoughts, if that's okay.
So my last thought for everybody, the most important thing was this military style execution. These organisations bring that type of leadership to this crisis right now. It is all about speed, and it's all about this military style execution and getting on with it. They don't stop. They go hard, they go fast, and they get it done. They don't procrastinate. They get on with it. And that's probably the biggest take I can give to everyone today.
Mark, that's awesome in terms of that process that you go through, and the results that we get obviously speak for themselves in terms of some of the excellent results you've had just recently, but also over the past, and that we've had as an organisation to help business navigate through complexity of just business in general, but also in relation to especially at this particular point in time. So thank you for sharing that with us today. Really appreciate it. We'll obviously share those slides with everyone as well, just so people can have that sort of knowledge about how they can pivot quickly in their organisations.